The stars stretched endlessly before the viewing screen of the eternal dawn. Captain Deho stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the alien homeworld grow larger as they approached. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass, and he could see the long scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw. The scar was old now, almost 10 years, but it still pulled tight when he smiled. He touched it without thinking. "Remembering fire and screaming metal, Captain. We're receiving clearance to enter their orbital space," Hana called from the engineering station. She was the best engineer Deho had ever worked with, though she'd never admitted herself. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease. "Take us in slowly," Deho said. "I don't want to spook them with aggressive maneuvers." Tae Min, the youngest member of the crew, leaned forward at his station. He was their language specialist, barely 25 years old, with nervous energy that made him tap his fingers constantly. "Sir, I've been studying their greeting protocols. We should bow at a 45-degree angle when we meet the Queen. Any lower is considered submissive. Any higher is insulting." "Noted," Deho replied. He appreciated the young man's thoroughness, even if it sometimes bordered on anxiety. Jiwoo, their security officer, stood near the door with her arms crossed. Half her face was covered in cybernetic enhancements that glowed faintly blue. She'd lost most of her left side in the same war that had scarred Deho. "I don't like this," she said quietly. "We're 4 humans going to meet an empire that controls hundreds of worlds. If they wanted to kill us, we couldn't stop them. That's why we're here," Deho said. "To make sure they don't want to kill us." Humanity had been in space for only 30 years. 30 years since they'd built the first faster-than-light ships. 30 years since they realized the galaxy was crowded with alien civilizations, most of them far older and more powerful than Earth could ever hope to be. In that time, humanity had made mistakes. They'd fought wars among themselves over distant colonies. They'd lost thousands of people to stupidity and desperation. Deho had been part of those wars. He'd seen the worst of what humans could do to each other when resources were scarce and hope was dying. But he'd also seen the best. The Velthari homeworld filled the screen now. It was beautiful, covered in purple oceans and silver continents that sparkled under their sun. In orbit around the planet hung dozens of massive structures, some of them shaped like flowers, others like geometric crystals. The largest was the palace ship where Queen Nalvera held court. "We're being guided to a docking port," Hana said. "Their pilots are taking over our navigation." Deho nodded. Standard procedure when dealing with paranoid civilizations. He couldn't blame them. Humanity's reputation had spread through the nearby sectors. Young species, violent, unpredictable, desperate for allies because they knew how vulnerable they were. All of it was true. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. When the Eternal Dawn finally connected to the palace ship, Deho gathered his crew near the airlock. They were all wearing their formal uniforms, dark blue with silver trim. Deho had polished his captain's insignia until it gleamed. "Remember," he said, looking at each of them, "we're not here as conquerors. We're not here to demand anything. We're here to ask for a chance. Be respectful, be honest, and if something goes wrong, follow my lead." "And if they try to kill us?" Jiwoo asked. "Then you have permission to be creative," Deho said with a slight smile. The airlock opened. The corridor beyond was unlike anything Deho had seen before. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The air smelled strange, like flowers he couldn't name mixed with something metallic. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, making each step feel deliberate. 2 Velthari warriors waited for them. Deho had seen pictures, but seeing them in person was different. They stood almost 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in chitinous armor that shimmered with colors ranging from deep purple to bright silver. They had 4 arms, 2 thick and powerful, 2 slender and precise. Their faces were elegant and alien, with large multifaceted eyes that reflected light like precious gems. When they moved, it was with a grace that seemed impossible for creatures so large. One of them spoke in perfect English. "Captain Deho, welcome to the Court of Eternal Memory. Queen Nalvera will receive you in the throne chamber. Follow us." They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they passed. Tae Min kept glancing around with wide eyes, probably cataloging everything for his research. Hana walked with her usual confidence, unbothered by the alien surroundings. Jiwoo kept her hand near her sidearm, even though weapons would be useless here. Finally, they reached a pair of massive doors that opened silently. The throne chamber was enormous. The ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, covered in what looked like living constellations. Hundreds of Velthari filled the space, standing in perfect formations along the walls. They all turned to watch as the human delegation entered. At the far end of the chamber, elevated on a platform of crystalline steps, sat Queen Nalvera. She was larger than the warriors, her armor more elaborate, covered in patterns that seemed to tell stories Deho couldn't read. Her eyes were the color of amber, and when they focused on him, he felt like she could see through to his bones. She radiated authority that came not from force but from absolute certainty of her place in the universe. Deho and his crew walked forward, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. When they reached the appropriate distance, they stopped and bowed exactly 45 degrees, just as Taemin had instructed. "Your Majesty," Deho said, straightening, "I am Captain Deho of the Human Coalition. We come seeking dialogue and friendship between our peoples." The Queen regarded them in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying easily across the chamber despite not being particularly loud. "Humanity, a young species, violent, fractured. Why should the Velthari Empire concern itself with you?" Deho had prepared for this question. "Because we learn quickly. Because we survive when we shouldn't. Because we value honor and keep our promises even when it costs us. We're young, yes, but we're willing to prove ourselves." "Many species have made similar claims," the Queen said. "Most were extinct within a century of entering galactic affairs. Then we'll be the exception," Deho replied. A ripple of sound moved through the assembled Velthari. Whether it was approval or disapproval, Deho couldn't tell. Queen Nalvera leaned forward slightly. "You speak with confidence for someone who commands a species that barely controls its own star system. What makes you believe humanity deserves our attention?" Deho raised his hand to gesture, emphasizing his next words. "Because we faced the worst of ourselves and chosen to be better. Because the light caught his scar." The Queen stopped moving. Her amber eyes locked onto the side of his face, widening in what looked like shock. She rose from her throne abruptly, and the entire chamber fell into absolute silence. The movement was so unexpected that Jiwoo's hand actually reached her weapon before stopping. Queen Nalvera descended the crystal steps, each footfall deliberate. She approached Deho directly, ignoring every protocol, every tradition that should have kept her on that throne. She stopped mere feet from him, towering over him, staring at his scar with an intensity that made his skin prickle. When she spoke, her voice trembled, the mark of thermal venting. You were there. At Arcturus Station." Deho's heart hammered in his chest. How could she possibly know about Arcturus? That had been a human conflict on a human colony, years before first contact with any alien species. "Yes," he said slowly. "I was the engineering officer during the siege." "How do you—" "I was there too," the Queen whispered. The Queen's words hung in the air like a physical thing. Deho felt his crew stiffen behind him. Jiwoo's hand moved closer to her weapon. Taemin made a small, confused sound. Even Hana, who rarely showed surprise, drew in a sharp breath. "Your Majesty," one of the Velthari advisors said urgently, stepping forward. "Protocol demands—" "Silence," Queen Nalvera said without looking away from Deho. "Clear the chamber. All except my personal council and the humans." The massive room erupted in whispered conversations. Hundreds of Velthari began filing out through various doors, their movements efficient despite the obvious confusion. Deho stood frozen, trying to understand what was happening. Arcturus Station had been a human disaster, a human tragedy. There hadn't been any aliens there. There couldn't have been, could there? Within minutes, the vast throne chamber was nearly empty. Only a dozen Velthari remained clustered near the throne. They wore different armor than the warriors, marked with symbols that Deho recognized as scholarly or religious. The keepers of memory, if he remembered Taemin's briefings correctly. The Queen gestured toward a side chamber. "Come, we will speak privately." Deho exchanged glances with his crew. Jiwoo looked ready to fight. Hana looked calculating, probably running scenarios. Taemin just looked terrified. But they followed because what else could they do? The private chamber was smaller but no less impressive. The walls were transparent, showing the purple oceans of the Velthari homeworld below. A table stood in the center, low to the ground, surrounded by cushions designed for Velthari bodies. The Queen settled onto one with surprising grace for a creature so large. "Sit," she said, and it wasn't quite in order but close. Deho and his crew sat awkwardly on the cushions. The Velthari advisors arranged themselves around the room, watchful and silent. Queen Nalvera studied Deho's face for another long moment. Then she reached up and touched the side of her own head, where the chitinous armor was slightly discolored, the iridescent surface marked with old burn patterns that looked almost like Deho's scar. 63 years ago, she began, I was not yet queen. I was princess. Yes, but more importantly, I was a warrior. I commanded a scouting fleet tasked with mapping spatial anomalies near the edge of our territory. We encountered something we did not understand. A tier in space that pulled us in before we could escape. She paused, her eyes distant with memory. My ship was destroyed. Most of my crew died. The few of us who survived crashed on a planet we had never charted. A world with breathable air but no signs of civilization. We were stranded. Our distress beacon was broken. Our life support was failing. We took shelter in what we thought was a natural cave system, but it was not natural. It was built. Abandoned but built. Deho felt cold realization creeping up his spine. The lower decks, he whispered. The maintenance tunnels beneath Arcturus Station. They were abandoned when the colony was first established. Too unstable to use. We only went down there during the siege because we were desperate. The Queen nodded slowly. We hid there for many of your weeks. We did not know humans existed. We had never seen your species. When you finally came, when the colony was established above us, we remained hidden. We were weak, injured. We did not know if you would help us or kill us, so we waited and survived on what little we could scavenge. One of the advisors, an older Velthari with silver-white armor, spoke for the first time. The princess's distress signal finally reached us years later. By then, what we found was a human colony under siege by other humans. We observed but did not interfere. It was not our conflict. The siege lasted 3 months, Deho said quietly, remembering. The rebel faction wanted the mineral rights. They were willing to kill everyone to get them. They damaged the reactor coolant system on purpose, thinking they could force a surrender. But the reactor kept building heat. If it reached critical mass, it would have vaporized everything within 100 kilometers. Including us, the Queen said. We were too weak to escape. We could only wait and hope that someone would fix the reactor. But no one did. The humans fighting above us were too busy killing each other. The heat kept rising. We prepared to die, Hana leaned forward, but someone vented the reactor manually. From the inside. That's why Captain Deho has that scar. The radiation and heat flash caught him when he opened the emergency vents. I thought I was going to die, Deho admitted. The protective suit was failing. The radiation counters were screaming. But if I didn't open those vents, everyone would die. The colonists. The children in the shelters, everyone. He touched his scar. I got lucky. The emergency blast doors closed faster than expected. The radiation hit me, but not long enough to kill me. Just long enough for this. Queen Nalvera's eyes shimmered with something that might have been tears, though Deho wasn't sure if Velthari could cry. You saved my life. You saved all of us who hid below. The radiation pulse was painful, yes. We bear the scars still. But we lived because you vented that reactor. I have spent decades searching for the one who did this. My people investigated Arcturus Station after the siege ended. But your colony wars scattered records. Ships were lost. Databases were destroyed. I could never find the name of the one who sacrificed themselves. I didn't know I was sacrificing myself, Deho said. I hoped to survive. I just knew that doing nothing guaranteed death for everyone. Hoping to survive while accepting death, the Queen said. That is the highest form of courage in Velthari philosophy. To act not because success is certain, but because the alternative is unacceptable. She stood, and all the advisors immediately straightened. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. In our culture, a life debt is sacred. It binds not just individuals, but their entire peoples across generations. By saving my life, you created a bond that once recognized cannot be broken. Humanity has proven itself worthy not through conquest or cunning, but through sacrifice without expectation of reward. Tamin's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. Your Majesty, does this mean? It means, the Queen interrupted, that I will propose a formal alliance between the Velthari Empire and the Human Coalition. It means that humanity will be offered mentorship in galactic affairs. It means that the bond between our species is now written in the memory archives and cannot be undone. Deho felt dizzy. They had come here hoping for trade agreements, maybe a non-aggression pact if they were lucky. Instead, They were being offered something that would change humanity's position in the galaxy forever. But before he could respond, one of the Velthari advisors stepped forward. This one was different from the others, wearing armor marked with military symbols. His voice was hard and cold. "Your Majesty, with respect, I must object." The Queen turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "Speak, War Master Krevdan." "A life debt to an individual is one thing," Krevdan said. "But extending it to an entire species? Humanity is violent, unstable, barely civilized. One act of courage does not erase their nature. They fight themselves constantly. They have no unity. How can we trust them with our secrets, our technology, our friendship?" Other advisors shifted uncomfortably. Clearly, Krevdan was voicing concerns that some of them shared. The Queen's voice remained steady. "The captain saved my life. The debt is real." "The debt is yours," Krevdan countered, "not the Empire's. I do not question your honor, Your Majesty. I question the wisdom of elevating a species that may turn on us the moment it suits them. We have seen this before with the Tivar. We offered them friendship, and they used our trust to steal our weapons. 50,000 Velthari died in that betrayal." Jiwoo stood up abruptly. "We are not the Tivar." "No," Krevdan agreed, looking at her with his multifaceted eyes. "You are worse. At least the Tivar had achieved some stability before they betrayed us. Humanity is still tearing itself apart. What happens when your civil wars spill into our territory? What happens when one faction of humans allies with us, while another becomes our enemy?" Daeho held up a hand, stopping Jiwoo from responding. He looked directly at Krevdan. "You're right to have doubts. We haven't proven ourselves to you. We've only proven ourselves to your queen. So what would it take? What would convince you that humanity deserves this alliance?" Krevdan's eyes narrowed. "A trial? An ancient rite called the Trial of Worth. You would face a test of character, not of strength. A test to prove that humanity can be trusted with the responsibility of alliance with the Velthari Empire." The Queen looked displeased. "The Trial of Worth has not been invoked in 3 centuries. Then perhaps it is overdue," Krevdan said. The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut. Daeho watched the Queen's expression carefully, trying to read alien features for signs of what she was thinking. The other advisors remained silent, clearly unwilling to take sides between their queen and the War Master. Finally, Queen Nalvera spoke. "If Captain Daeho agrees to the Trial of Worth, will you accept the results, whatever they may be?" Krevdan bowed his head slightly. "I will abide by tradition, Your Majesty. If the human passes, I will support the alliance without reservation. If he fails, then humanity must wait until they have matured as a species before approaching us again." "How long is wait?" Hana asked bluntly. "A century. Perhaps 2, Krevdan replied. "That's a death sentence," Jiwoo said. "Humanity needs allies now. In a century, we could be conquered or extinct." "Then perhaps you should have prepared better before reaching for the stars," Krevdan said coldly. Daeho held up his hand again, silencing his crew. He looked at the Queen. "What does this trial involve? What exactly would I have to do?" The Queen moved to one of the transparent walls, looking out at her homeworld. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with something like regret. "The Trial of Worth is not a test of combat or intelligence. It is a test of character through impossible choice. You will be presented with a situation where any decision causes harm. The trial judges not whether you choose correctly, but whether you choose with honor and accept the consequences of that choice." "That sounds rigged," Hana muttered. "It is meant to be difficult," one of the older advisors said. "The galaxy is full of impossible choices. A species that cannot face them with honor is a species that will cause chaos wherever it goes." Daeho thought about it. He thought about humanity's position in the galaxy, desperate and vulnerable. He thought about the millions of people back on Earth and the colonies who were counting on this mission to succeed. He thought about his crew who would support whatever decision he made. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll take your trial." The Queen turned to face him. "You don't have to accept. I can refuse Krevdan's challenge. The life debt is real and binding. I have the authority to grant the alliance without any trial." "But then there would always be doubt," Daeho said. "Some of your people would always question whether humanity earned this alliance or just got lucky. If I take the trial and pass, there's no room for doubt. And if I fail," he shrugged, "then maybe Krevdan is right and we're not ready." Krevdan made a sound that might have been approval. "Spoken with more wisdom than I expected from a human. Very well. The trial will be prepared. It will take 3 days to arrange according to proper tradition. 3 days, the Queen said. Captain Deho and his crew will remain as our guests during this time. They will be given quarters and access to our historical archives. War Master, you will oversee the trial preparations personally. I want no accusations of favoritism from either side. Krevdan bowed and left the chamber, followed by half the advisors. The remaining Velthari, the ones who seemed more aligned with the Queen, relaxed slightly. The Queen approached Deho again. This time her movements were less formal, almost gentle. I am sorry. I did not expect opposition to be so strong. The life debt should have been enough. Politics is complicated everywhere, Deho said. Even on Earth, not everyone would agree to an alliance with an alien empire. Fear makes people cautious. Wisdom also makes people cautious, the Queen replied. Krevdan is not wrong to question. He is a good war master. He protects our people. It is his duty to doubt. She gestured to one of the remaining advisors, a smaller Velthari whose armor was covered in what looked like writing. This is Lorekeeper Melrys. She will show you to your quarters and give you access to our archives. I encourage you to learn about us during these 3 days. Understanding our culture may help you in the trial. Melrys stepped forward and bowed to the humans. When she spoke, her voice was softer than the other Velthari. Please follow me. I will make sure you are comfortable. As they were led out, Taemin leaned close to Deho. Sir, what do you think the trial will be? No idea, Deho admitted. But I've faced worse things than tests. We'll deal with it when it comes. The quarters they were given were surprisingly comfortable. The furniture was strange, designed for Velthari bodies, but there were human-sized chairs and beds that had clearly been prepared in advance. Large windows showed the planet below, its purple oceans catching the light of the setting sun. Hana immediately started examining the room's technology, her engineer's instincts impossible to suppress. Jiwoo checked all the exits and security measures. Taemin collapsed into a chair, looking exhausted from the stress. That went better and worse than expected, Hana said, running her fingers over a control panel. We got the alliance we wanted. We just have to earn it first. Can I say something? Taemin asked quietly. Of course, Deho said. I've been studying the Velthari for months, reading everything humanity has gathered about them, and one thing keeps coming up in the reports. They value honor and memory above everything. But they're also cautious. Really cautious. They've been betrayed before by species they tried to help. The Tivar that Krevdan mentioned? They weren't just enemies. They were friends first, partners. And when they turned on the Velthari, it hurt more than just physically. It hurt their trust. Jiwoo crossed her arms. So you're saying Krevdan has a point? That we shouldn't be trusted? I'm saying he's scared, Taemin replied. The whole empire is probably scared. They're powerful, but they've been hurt, and now they have to decide whether to trust us or not. The Queen wants to because of the life debt. But Krevdan represents everyone who's afraid of making the same mistake twice. Deho sat down heavily. That actually makes me feel better about this. If they were willing to just give us everything without question, I'd be suspicious. The fact that they're arguing about it means they're taking it seriously. It also means the trial is going to be designed to test exactly what they're most afraid of, Hana pointed out. They want to know if we'll betray them when it's convenient. Then I'll have to prove we won't, Deho said simply. Melrys returned an hour later with food and an offer to show them the archives. Taemin practically jumped at the chance. The archives turned out to be less like a library and more like an interactive experience. Holographic displays showed Velthari history stretching back thousands of years. Wars, alliances, betrayals, triumphs, tragedies. Deho found himself drawn to the section about the Tivar betrayal. The species had been reptilian, roughly humanoid. The Velthari had spent decades helping them develop advanced technology and space travel. In return, the Tivar had seemed grateful and loyal, until they weren't. The betrayal had been sudden and brutal. Tivar agents had infiltrated Velthari military facilities and stolen weapon designs. They'd used those weapons to attack Velthari colonies, killing thousands before the Empire could respond. The war that followed had lasted years and ended with the Tivar homeworld destroyed, and their species reduced to scattered refugees. We did not want to destroy them, Melrys said softly, standing beside Deho as he watched the historical display. But they left us no choice. They would not surrender. They would not negotiate. They only wanted to take what we had built and use it against us. How long ago was this? Deho asked. 230 years. Not long by our standards. Many who remember it still live. War Master Krevdan lost his entire family in the initial attacks. His mate, his children, all dead because we were too trusting. Deho understood then. Krevdan wasn't just being cautious. He was trying to prevent another genocide. He was trying to make sure his people didn't suffer again because of misplaced trust. I can't promise humanity will never disappoint you, Deho said. We're flawed. We make mistakes. We fight among ourselves. But we're also capable of learning, of growing, of being better than we were. Melrys studied him with her large eyes. The Queen believes this. She has faith in you because of what you did at Arcturus Station, but faith is not enough for some. They need proof. Then I'll give them proof, Deho said. That night, Deho couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, looking out at the alien world below, thinking about impossible choices and tests of character. Jiwoo found him there an hour before dawn. Can't sleep either, she asked. Too much on my mind, he admitted. She stood beside him in silence for a while. Then she said, I've been thinking about Arcturus Station. About what you did. You know, most people thought you were crazy, right? Suicidal. They said you were just lucky to survive. Maybe I was, Deho said. No, Jiwoo replied firmly. You knew exactly what you were doing. You calculated the odds and decided they were acceptable. That's not luck. That's courage. She touched her own cybernetic enhancements. When I got hurt, you pulled me out of the rubble. You carried me to the medbay even though you were injured yourself. That wasn't luck either. That was choice. Where are you going with this? Deho asked. I'm saying that whatever this trial is, you'll make the right choice. Because that's what you do. You see what needs to be done and you do it. Even when it costs you. That's why we follow you. That's why humanity sent you here, and that's why you're going to pass this test. Deho smiled slightly. You sound very confident. I am, Jiwoo said. Because I've seen you at your worst, and even then you were the next 2 days passed in a strange mixture of tension and wonder. Deho and his crew explored the palace ship, guided by Melrys, who seemed genuinely interested in helping them understand Velthari culture. They watched traditional ceremonies, tasted alien foods that were surprisingly edible, and learned about the complex honor system that governed Velthari society. But underneath everything, Deho felt the pressure building. The trial was coming, and he still had no idea what form it would take. On the third morning, Hana burst into his quarters with her datapad in hand. Her expression was troubled. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Deho was immediately alert. What kind of problem? The technical kind. I've been monitoring the palace ship's external communication arrays because, well, that's what I do, and I found something strange. There are encrypted communications going out to several Velthari warships in nearby systems. The encryption is military grade, and the transmission patterns suggest coordination. Could it be normal military communications? Deho asked, though his instincts told him otherwise. Not with this level of secrecy, and not to ships that aren't part of the palace guard. Captain, I think someone is planning something they don't want the Queen to know about. Taemin entered the room looking worried. I just had a weird conversation with one of the lower-ranked advisors. He seemed nervous. He kept asking me questions about how quickly our ship could leave if we needed to. When I pressed him about why, he shut down completely and hurried away. Jiwoo appeared in the doorway. I've been watching the guard rotations. They changed yesterday. New soldiers, ones who don't seem as loyal to the Queen. They keep looking at her with something like contempt when they think no one is watching. Deho felt ice in his stomach. You're saying there might be a coup? I'm saying something is wrong, Hana replied. And it's happening around the same time as your trial. That can't be a coincidence. Deho ran his hand through his hair, thinking quickly. If there was a coup being planned against Queen Nalvera, it put him in an impossible position. He could warn the Queen, but that might be seen as humanity interfering in Velthari internal politics. It could destroy any chance of the alliance. On the other hand, if he said nothing and the Queen was killed or overthrown, the alliance would die anyway. We need more information, he said. Can you trace those encrypted communications? Find out who's sending them? Hana shook her head. Not without access to their central security systems, and that would require clearance we don't have. If I tried to hack in and got caught, it would look like we're spying on them. That would be just as bad as a coup for our chances here. What about talking to Melrys? Taemin suggested. She seems trustworthy. Maybe she knows something. Or maybe she's part of it, Jiwoo said darkly. We can't trust anyone here. We don't know enough about their politics. Daeho paced the room, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Every option seemed wrong. Every path led to disaster in one form or another. A chime sounded at the door. They all froze. Then Malrus's voice came through. Captain Daeho, it is time. The trial of worth is about to begin. Daeho looked at his crew. Not a word about this to anyone, not yet. Let me get through the trial first, and then we'll decide what to do. Sir, Jiwoo said urgently. If there's a coup happening during the trial, then I'll deal with it, Daeho said firmly. One crisis at a time. The trial chamber was unlike anything Daeho expected. It was a small circular room with walls that seemed to be made of liquid light. In the center stood a simple pedestal with a holographic display. Queen Nalvera was there along with Krevdan and the full council of advisors. The room felt heavy with significance. Captain Daeho, the queen said formally, you stand before us to undertake the trial of worth. This is an ancient tradition of our people, meant to test not your strength or intelligence, but your character when faced with impossible choices. Do you accept this trial freely and without coercion? I accept, Daeho said. Krevdan stepped forward. The trial is simple in structure but profound in meaning. You will be presented with a scenario. You must make a choice. That choice will have consequences. How you face those consequences will determine whether you pass or fail. Do you understand? I understand, Daeho replied, though he wasn't sure he did. The holographic display activated, showing a complex star chart. Krevdan began to speak. This is the scenario. You are the captain of a human vessel. You have just discovered evidence of a plot to overthrow the leadership of an allied government. This government has promised your species protection and resources that you desperately need. However, revealing the plot will cause a civil war that could kill millions and destroy the alliance entirely. Keeping silent might allow the coup to succeed peacefully, maintaining stability but putting an untrustworthy government in power. Daeho felt his blood run cold. They knew. Somehow they knew about the suspicious communications and the guard rotations. This wasn't a hypothetical scenario. This was real. Your choice, Krevdan continued, his eyes locked on Daeho. Do you reveal the plot and risk civil war, or do you stay silent and hope for the best? The room was silent. Every eye was on Daeho. He could feel his crew's tension from where they stood near the entrance. He could feel the Queen's gaze, heavy with meaning he couldn't quite read. This was the test. Not a hypothetical at all. They had set up a real situation to see how he would respond. If he revealed the coup, he would be choosing loyalty to the Queen over the stability of the Velthari Empire. If he stayed silent, he would be choosing pragmatism over honor. But there was a third option. There was always a third option if you were creative enough. Daeho stepped forward to the holographic display. With respect, War Master, your scenario is based on false assumptions. Krevdan's eyes narrowed. Explain. You assume that revealing a coup will automatically lead to civil war. But that's only true if the plotters have enough support to fight openly. If they're operating in secret, it's because they know they can't win a fair conflict. By bringing their plot into the light, you force them to either stand behind their actions publicly or back down. He turned to address not just Krevdan, but the entire council. You also assume that staying silent is the safer option. The coups don't usually bring stability. They bring paranoia and purges. The new leadership would spend years worrying about the next plot against them. That's not stability. That's just delayed chaos. So you would reveal the plot? The Queen asked, her voice carefully neutral. No, Daeho said. I would do something else entirely. I would publicly challenge the plotters to declare themselves and state their grievances openly, in accordance with your own traditions. The Velthari value honor above all else, right? So make it a matter of honor. Force them to fight fairly or admit they don't have the courage of their convictions. Krevdan made a sound that might have been surprise. You would invoke a challenge of honor against traitors? I would give them a chance to not be traitors, Daeho replied. If their concerns are legitimate, let them speak. If they're right that the Queen is making a mistake with the human alliance, let them convince everyone openly. But if they're wrong, if they're just power-hungry or afraid, then they'll reveal themselves for what they are when forced into the light. He looked directly at Krevdan. Because the real problem isn't the plot itself. It's the fear and doubt that made the plot possible. You can stop one coup, but if you don't address the underlying issues, there will just be another one later. So deal with the fear. Deal with the doubt. Have the conversation you've all been avoiding. The room was silent for a long moment. Then one of the older advisors spoke up, his voice thoughtful. The human proposes making the trial itself public, forcing us to confront our divisions rather than hiding them. That is dangerously radical, another advisor said. Or dangerously honest, a third countered. Krevdan stepped closer to Deho, studying him intently. You realize that what you're proposing could still lead to conflict? That forcing these issues into the open might tear the Empire apart? Maybe, Deho admitted. But at least it would be honest conflict. At least everyone would know where they stand. And in my experience, honest problems are easier to solve than hidden ones. The Queen stood from her seat. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. The trial is over. Captain Deho has chosen neither the easy path nor the expected path. He has chosen the human path, the path of confrontation and honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. She looked at Krevdan. War Master, you have been my most trusted advisor for 60 years. If you have concerns about my decisions, you should have spoken to me directly instead of testing the human captain with scenarios drawn from our own political situation. Krevdan bowed his head. Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. I only wanted to ensure that humanity could be trusted, the Queen finished. I understand. And now you have your answer. When faced with an impossible choice, when given every reason to either interfere or ignore our internal problems, the human captain chose to challenge us to solve our own problems honestly. That is wisdom, she turned back to Deho. You passed the trial. But more than that, you have taught us so. The revelation hit the council like a physical blow. Advisors looked at each other with suspicion and surprise. Krevdan's expression was unreadable. His multifaceted eyes fixed on Deho with an intensity that made the human captain want to step back. You suspected a coup against the Queen, Krevdan said slowly. And you did nothing? I suspected political tension, Deho corrected. Which isn't the same thing. Every government has internal disagreements. It wasn't my place to interfere unless I was certain there was actual danger to the Queen's life. But if you had been certain, one of the advisors demanded. What then? Deho met the advisor's gaze steadily. Then I would have warned the Queen immediately. The alliance means nothing if it's built on her death, but I wasn't certain. All I had were suspicious communications and nervous guards. That could mean a dozen different things. So I waited to gather more information before making accusations that could damage everything we've worked for. The Queen raised one of her hands, commanding silence. Everyone leave us. All except War Master Krevdan and Captain Deho. The advisors filed out, their whispered conversations fading as the doors closed. When the chamber was empty except for the three of them, the Queen descended from her elevated platform and approached Deho directly. You are either very wise or very foolish, she said. I cannot yet tell which. Probably both, Your Majesty, Deho replied with a slight smile. Krevdan made a sound that might have been amusement. At least he is honest about his limitations. The War Master moved to stand beside the Queen, his posture less aggressive than before. Captain, I owe you an explanation. There was no coup. The suspicious communications your engineer detected were part of the trial preparation. We needed to create a realistic scenario to test you. You were testing whether we'd spy on you, Deho realized, whether we'd hack your systems or go behind your back. Yes, the Queen confirmed. And you did neither. You noticed the anomalies but chose to wait and trust our processes. That required great restraint, especially knowing how much your species needs this alliance. It also required trust in us, Krevdan added, his tone softening slightly. Trust that we would not actually allow harm to come to our Queen just to test a human. You gambled that our honor would protect Her Majesty even during a trial. That was unexpectedly insightful. Deho felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. So this whole thing was a test within a test. The trial was to see how I'd respond to an impossible choice, but you were also testing whether my crew would respect your sovereignty, even when we were worried. Correct, the Queen said. And you passed both tests. The trial of worth is complete, and Captain Deho has proven that humanity understands the balance between loyalty and respect for autonomy. That is essential in any alliance. She reached out and very gently touched Deho's scar with one of her slender hands. This mark saved my life. It is a symbol of human courage and sacrifice. I want it to become a symbol of our alliance as well. With your permission, I would like to commission a monument in the capital city of my homeworld. It would show a human hand and a Velthari hand, both bearing the scars of survival joined together. Deho felt emotion tighten his throat. Your Majesty, I would be honored. Krevdan stepped forward. Captain, I misjudged your species. I allowed fear and past betrayals to cloud my judgment. The Tavar hurt us deeply, and I did not want to see my people suffer that way again. But you have shown me that not all young species are the same. You have shown me that humanity is something we value. Above all else, the courage to face difficult truths and the wisdom to know when to act and when to wait. He extended one of his hands in what Deho recognized as a Velthari gesture of respect. Deho grasped it carefully, feeling the strange texture of the alien's armored skin. I will support the alliance, Krevdan said formally, without reservation and without doubt, and I will personally oversee the military cooperation between our species. If humanity is to be our ally, then they will have access to our knowledge and our protection. Thank you, War Master, Deho said. That means more than you know. The Queen gestured toward the door. Come. It is time to announce the alliance to both our peoples. The formal ceremony will take place in the main throne chamber, and it will be broadcast across all Velthari worlds and to Earth. As they walked through the corridors of the palace ship, Deho's crew joined them. Hana looked relieved, Taemin looked excited, and Jiwoo looked cautiously optimistic. Melrys appeared as well, her armor gleaming in the crystalline light. I knew you would pass, Melrys said softly to Deho. The Queen chose well when she recognized your scar. The throne chamber was packed with Velthari when they arrived. Thousands of them filled the space, standing in perfect formations. At the center, a holographic display showed Earth, green and blue and beautiful against the black of space. Queen Nalvera took her place on the throne while Deho stood at the base of the steps, his crew beside him. The chamber fell silent. People of the Velthari Empire, the Queen began, her voice amplified to fill the enormous space. Today we make history. Today we formally recognize the human coalition as allies and friends. This alliance is built not on convenience or necessity, but on a debt of honor that spans decades and the courage to face difficult truths. She descended the steps and stood beside Deho. This human saved my life when I was young and lost. He did not know who I was. He did not know what it would mean. He simply saw that action was needed and took that action, accepting the cost to himself. That is the essence of honor. That is the foundation of our alliance. She turned to face Deho directly. Captain Deho, on behalf of the Velthari Empire, I offer humanity our friendship, our protection, and our knowledge. We will help guide your species through the dangers of galactic politics. We will share our technology and our wisdom. We will stand beside you as you find your place among the stars. Deho bowed deeply. Your Majesty, on behalf of humanity, I accept this alliance with gratitude and humility. We know we have much to learn. We know we are young and sometimes reckless, but we promise to honor this friendship and to prove ourselves worthy of the trust you place in us. The Queen reached up and touched her scar, then gestured to Deho's. These marks tell a story of survival against impossible odds, a story of sacrifice without expectation of reward. Let them serve as a reminder to both our peoples that the strongest bonds are forged in the hardest moments. She raised her voice to address the assembly again. From this day forward, let it be known across the galaxy that humanity stands under the protection of the Velthari Empire. Any who threaten them threaten us. Any who harm them will answer to us. This is my decree, witnessed and recorded by the keepers of memory. The chamber erupted in a sound that Deho eventually recognized as applause, though it was nothing like human clapping. The Velthari struck their armored limbs together, creating a rhythmic percussion that filled the air like thunder. Later, after the ceremony was complete and the formal announcements had been made, Deho found himself alone with his crew in their quarters. They were supposed to rest before the journey home, but none of them could sleep. We did it, Taemin said, still sounding amazed. We actually did it. Humanity has a powerful ally. We're not alone anymore. We were never alone, Jiwoo said quietly. We had each other. But yeah, this is definitely better. Hana pulled up a star chart on her datapad. The Queen's people are already sending technical data, ship designs, medical technology, agricultural techniques that could transform our colonies. This is going to change everything. Deho looked out the window at the Velthari homeworld, thinking about everything that had happened. A random act of desperate courage during a brutal siege had somehow led to this moment. The scar that he'd seen as a mark of survival was now a symbol of an alliance that could shape humanity's future for centuries. "Captain," Hana said, pulling him from his thoughts. "The Queen sent a personal message. She wants to know if you'd be willing to return in 6 months to help establish the first joint, human Velthari colony, a place where both species can live and work together." "Tell her yes," Deho said without hesitation. "Tell her we'd be honored." As the Eternal Dawn prepared to depart the next morning, Queen Nalvera came to see them off personally. She stood at the docking port, her armor gleaming, surrounded by her guards and advisors. "Safe journey, Captain," she said. "When you return home, tell your people that they have friends among the stars. Tell them that their courage has been recognized. Tell them that the scars they bear from their difficult past are not marks of shame but badges of honor." "I will, Your Majesty," Deho promised. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Thank you, Deho, not just for saving my life all those years ago, but for reminding me why that life was worth saving. For showing me that honor and courage still exist in the galaxy. For giving me hope that the future can be better than the past." "Thank you for recognizing me," Deho replied. "For seeing past the scar to the person beneath it. For giving humanity a chance we desperately needed." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then the Queen touched her scar one final time before turning and walking away. Her